Hello, I'm Simon Conquest from Conquest Overland. Welcome to part 2 of servicing a Land Rover Discovery Series 2 TD5 used for overlanding in accordance with the official Land Rover service schedule.
The next bit on the list is to visually check the radiators and intercoolers for damage and obstructions. It's all looking pretty good. You can't see into the dark so well with the camera, but I'm happy with it. Hello fella, welcome to Britain. Sorry you're no longer in Australia. I already know from when I had the front grille off that the air conditioning cooling element, that's quite badly damaged. Amazingly, that's not leaking, but that won't be a job I can do myself because you need special equipment to take the gas out, and it's irresponsible to just let it off into the atmosphere. Now I'm checking the auxiliary drive belt, which is this one here. Just a word of caution when you're working around the radiator, this pipe here, these plastic pipes have a tendency to become brittle and snap. Fortunately they're relatively cheap, but you just don't want the hassle of it breaking if you can help it. This drive belt is only a few weeks old because I was having a fudge around here a little while back and I noticed it had a split in it, so it's already been replaced. But what you're looking for is any signs of fraying anywhere on the belt, so don't just look at the bit that's easy to get to, cast your eyes all the way around. And you're also looking for any cracks along the V section of the belt. Small cracks in the actual rubber bit that's sticking up are acceptable. Large cracks, especially any that go long ways, are not acceptable, and you need to replace the belt. It's actually a very easy job to do. To replace it, you start by removing this, which is the viscous fan. You need to get your spanners in there, viscous fan coupling spanners. I'll be showing you how to do that later on when we do the intercooler, to take the fan off. And it's a simple case of using a spanner to move the tensioner, to release the tension on the belt, and it slips off. It's really, really easy. The only thing you have to be mindful of is the routing. So make a note of that, make a mental note of that before you take the old one off. Simples.
Moving on, item number 18 on the official service schedule is to check the condition of the air suspension intake filter, and that's located inside here.
The light cluster's been taken off. I don't like leaving heavy items hanging by the cables, so I've disconnected the plug as well, just so there's no pressure on the wires. If you lose any of the screws, then they're size 8 by ½ an inch long screws. This little black cylinder thing is the casing for the air intake for the air suspension. As you can see, it's absolutely covered in Australian bull dust, so any overlanders will be familiar with the amount of dust and how it gets into incredible spaces. I'm going to be taking this apart very shortly to check the condition of the filter, which is inside that little black box. You'll probably notice that the filter disappeared then. It's just come unclipped from the tiny little plastic clip that holds it to the body, and off comes the lid, which will also have a clean. And as you can see, there's plenty of dust in there, so I'm going to be very gently removing the pad. Just using a pick to get the bottom one out. The bottom one is made out of felt. I hope you can hear me above the wind noise. These are both in good condition, apart from being filthy dirty, so I'm going to give them a brush and a clean, get the dust off. They're clean enough. I'm going to put the bottom one back in and then the top one back in. I'm happy to reuse these because they've not deteriorated. They just needed a bit of a knock to knock the dust out. You're making sure that you can still get air through there into the system. Right, the caps had a little clean out, so it's going back on. The slot at the back here lines up with the peg that fits into the bodywork. It clips on, and then the peg presses into the hole in the bodywork to secure it in the upright position. That's it, that's done. Now, as a slight aside, I'm just going to show you a couple of the other bits in here. Coming up inside here, or actually coming down from the roof, this larger pipe here is the drain pipe from the rear sunroof. There's one on the other side as well. You've got two drain pipes. I've serviced the sunroofs already this summer, so, and blown air through, so I know that this isn't clogged. This one here is the breather pipe for the rear diff. Normally the breather pipe for the rear differential finishes underneath the car. Because we wanted to go wading, I've extended mine, and this one comes up towards the roof line so that the breather pipe top is well out of the way of the water.
Item number 19 on the Land Rover service schedule is to renew the antifreeze. Now, Land Rover reckon you should do this at 2 yearly intervals. However, times have changed. These vehicles are in excess of 20 years old now, and consequently the service schedule was written more than 20 years ago. And modern oat antifreeze treatments can easily last 150,000 miles. So you don't need to change it every 2 years anymore. But you do need to check it to make sure it's still strong enough to do its job. So what are we looking for? Looking at the container, it's nice and bright and orange. That's the colour of the coolant mixture inside, which incidentally dries pink if you do get a leak, but it's nice and bright orange and it looks nice and strong. Now, I happen to know that this one is less than a year old, the fluid in here, so this one definitely does not need changing. But if you're in any doubt, you can get quite cheaply a hydrometer from your car parts store. Now, these draw a little bit of the fluid into a clear plastic chamber, and inside that you've got a number of flotation markers which will tell you what the specific gravity and therefore the strength is of your coolant mixture, and from that you can make a decision whether you need to flush it out and change it or not. OAT incidentally stands for organic acid treatment, and it's full of lovely little things like anti-corrosion additives which will stop the sludge forming. I've been working on cars for more than 40 years now, and I can remember having to flush and then back flush cooling systems, and all that would come out is a horrible brown sludge. Fortunately, that just doesn't happen anymore. Now, you can get waterless coolants. Now, this is a chemical liquid that you put in that replaces the water, but for an overland vehicle that is really, really impractical. Stick with water. You need something that you can top up from a tap or even from a river if you're really stuck, so that you've got coolant in your system. You don't want to be messing around with these waterless coolants. Leave that for people with sports cars. If you do identify that you need to change your coolant, it's another really easy job. The drain plug is on one of the lower metal coolant pipes underneath the front of the engine. So you undo that, let the old stuff drain out. Please dispose of your old fluids responsibly. And you can undo the expansion cap to get the fluid to flow out quicker. Obviously, to top it up again, you're going to put that plug back in, and you need to take the bleed valve out of the top hose, and then you need to raise your expansion tank by at least 10 centimeters. You can probably see on the picture here, I just balanced mine on a length of wood. Then you need to pour your coolant in slowly. Now you need to pour it in slowly to give any air bubbles, air blocks, a chance to move. If you put the water in too quickly or the fluid in too quickly, you can cause air blocks. As soon as the fluid starts coming out of your bleed hose, close that off and then put your tank back into its proper position. Run the engine for a bit and check your levels and top up if you're required, and that's it. It's really quite an easy job, to be honest. Item number 20 on the list is to check the cooling, intercooler and heating systems for leaks. Now you're looking at the hoses and the oil pipes and you're checking their security and condition. Don't be scared to give the pipes a squeeze, check them for cracking, any signs of deterioration. And you're going to have to crawl around underneath. It's no good just looking at the top as per these views. You need to get underneath and have a look from the bottom up as well, and top up as required. One of the advantages of having oat in your coolant is that it shows up, in this case, nice and pink, so you can see the leaks, especially water leaks, quite clearly. Now this one's only minor, fortunately, and it's most likely due to a little bit of corrosion on the metal pipe. So what I'll be doing is taking the spring clip off, cleaning the underneath metal pipe, putting it back on. Another factor might be that over time these spring clips do lose a little bit of their energy, so if needs be I'll be putting a Jubilee clip on in place. If you do use Jubilee clips, don't be too heavy-handed, because you can actually cut into the hose with the clip if you do it up too tight. And of course, if you've got money to spare, silicone hoses can be a way forward. They are more expensive, but they are far more durable. I'm now going to look at items 23 and 16 on the service schedule. Item 23 is the air filter and dump valve, and item 16 is the ambient air sensor. It makes sense to do all of these at the same time, as they're all together in the same part of the engine bay. Now, being a vehicle used for overlanding, it's no surprise that we have a raised air intake, sometimes referred to as a snorkel. Ours has a Donaldson pre-filter centrifuge on the top. I'm not a great fan of the ram air type of heads, mainly because they do allow some rainwater in as well as dust. And obviously the whole big thing point of having a raised air intake is to keep the airflow into the engine clean. Most people think of them as being solely for wading, but they do also serve the purpose of keeping the dust out, which is the advantage of a centrifuge. The air spins around in there at great speed, separating the dust so that the clean air goes down the pipe. You can get what are called socks for the ram head tops, but they just clog up. Now, the Garrett G20 Turbo fitted to a D2, Disco 2, easily copes with the airflow from the centrifuge, and basically when you're travelling on rough dusty tracks, you're not doing so at motorway speeds anyway. Now, the pipe goes all the way down and passes through the wing, where it then fits into the factory standard air intake port. Now, we're on about servicing. So the additional service check item for an overland vehicle is to check the security of the raised air intake, paying very special attention to the seal where the raised intake meets the factory standard port. There's no point in having a snorkel if this part lets the water in. It's very important also to use a sealant that is compatible and safe to use with a MAF sensor. Sealants, I don't know whether you knew this, but sealants can take up to a week or longer sometimes to fully cure. So you don't want the fumes damaging your expensive MAF filter. The deepest we've waded was 1 metre deep, and that was up in the Kimbleys, and without our air intake being properly sealed, we would have definitely drawn water into the engine. That would have been goodnight Vienna. So let's have a look at the air filter. I've not looked inside this since we got back to the UK, so it's going to be interesting to see exactly how well the centrifuge has worked. We took a good cupful of dust out of the centrifuge, so that's at least a cupful of dust that isn't in the filter. So it does serve a purpose.
To change the air filter, I need to unclip the pipe from the mass airflow meter, which is here, and unclip the two clips holding the filter box on. I'm also going to just disconnect this little vacuum pipe here, air pipe here, because that's going to fall off and I'd rather have it coming off in a controlled fashion so I know where the end's gone. Then we'll lift it up. You'll notice that the air sensor is still attached to the box. So the first thing I'm going to do is have a look, see how clean that is. That's pretty clean. Dust out. Wow, look at that. Clearly dust has got through the system, very fine dust, because you can see there's red bull dust. I've mentioned the Australian bull dust, it gets everywhere. There's red bull dust on the cover for the mat filter. The actual filter itself looks pretty good. It does need changing though. One of the things I look for is any sign of water having got through. If you've got one of those ram heads on your raised air intake that I mentioned, you'll probably have signs of water damage here. This one's survived quite well. I'm just going to throw that. I'm hoping you can see this okay. There is quite a bit of dust in there. As far as I know, that dust has been in there for the whole of the Australian trip. I dare say that the garages who did our services wouldn't have vacuum cleaned this box out. Basically, your air comes down here, through here. At the back of this tube, around about here, is a well. And the idea is that any water that does come down here goes straight down that well into what's called a dump valve. You can't see the dump valve from the top, but it's a rubber valve with two flaps that hold themselves closed. When you go wading, the pressure of the water forces them closed. The idea being that water can only leave the box, it can't come into the box. If you do get water coming up through the dump valve, it should sit in the bottom here, bearing in mind that the route for the air is above the level of this box. It goes through here, so it gives a chance for the water to escape without going to the turbo and then further into the engine. So next thing I'm going to do is pause filming. I'm going to get the vacuum cleaner and give this a little clean out. This is the dump valve, so this is at the bottom of the air filter box. You can see the two flaps that close. There's absolutely no dirt in there at all, which is good. I've checked these before and found them to be completely caked and clogged with mud, but that's looking good. Happy with the dump valve. Now it's time to put the new air filter in. Nice and clean. Just check it quickly for damage, make sure there's no splits in the seal. And this is just literally plops in there where the old one came out. Sits down there nicely, and that's the filter in. Before I put the top back on, I'm going to be checking this here, which is the air sensor. I just need to check that for damage. The bit I'm working on is this, which is the air sensor. There's a little button to press on the back of the plug, which will slide the plug off, and it's held in with two PZ2 screws, which come out nice and easy, don't lose them though. should wobble off. There we go. So what we're looking for here is any damage. I'm going to give it a little clean. The O-ring seems to be in good condition. There's quite a bit of dirt in there though. And there's also quite a bit of dirt in the box, so I'm just going to give that a quick run through with a small brush before putting the sensor back on. So the sensor's been cleaned and the hole's been cleaned that it goes into. I've also quickly taken out the large O-ring that goes around the MAF sensor and given that a clean. Once again, we're putting metal fittings into plastic, so they don't need to be too tight. Just finger tight is fine on these. I'm not going to put the clip for the wires back on. Put this on by hooking these two hooks underneath the hinges to the front of the box, and then lowering the box down, and at the same time push the MAF sensor housing into the opening in the sensor box. It's quite tight with a new filter. Put your clips on at the back. Put your clips back on for your MAF sensor. Reconnect the air pipe that you took off at the very beginning. That just pushes on, there's no clip or anything on that. And then just reconnect your wiring harness. Again, watch out for this. These pipes get brittle with age and can easily break. So that's it. New air filter, air sensor checked, and it's all had a good old clean out. Now going to check the batteries. On an overland vehicle, it's quite typical to have two batteries. This one here is the main battery. What we're looking at is security. Is it still clamped down well? It is. Is the casing showing any signs of leaks or cracks or damage? No, it's not. Are your terminals on there tightly? They are. It's recommended to put some petroleum jelly on these terminals, but my experience is that you shouldn't put too much on because it always melts, dribbles down everywhere. So just a thin, very thin layer on the top will suffice. The other thing I'm looking at is the colour of the indicator in the window here. It's either going to be green or black. It should be a nice healthy green, which this is. If it's black, that indicates that it A needs recharging or B has come to the end of its life. The average life expectancy for a car battery is 7 years. This one's 5 years old and it's still looking good. Being an overlander, we do have two batteries. This is the auxiliary battery, which is an acid gel mat battery. So again, checking for the security. It's mounted in there, it's not going anywhere. The terminals are on there tight. I'm happy with that. This one is maintenance free. There isn't a green eye to tell me what the battery condition is like, but it is linked up to a solar charging system and solar power distribution panel. I'll show you that shortly, because that will tell me what state the battery is in.
This is our solar power controller, which is linked to the auxiliary battery as well as our solar panel up on the roof. You can tell from the icon in the middle of the top row that this battery is fully charged. and as it cycles through the values I can see that the battery is holding a nice healthy 13.8 volts, which I'm more than happy with. Item 27 on the service schedule is to check and top up the brake fluid, clutch fluid, power assisted steering fluid, ACE fluid and the screen washer reservoirs. I'm not going to show you how to do the screen washer reservoir, that's an easy one. The brake and clutch fluid share a reservoir, again easy to top up, and the power assisted steering fluid and the ACE fluid also share the same reservoir, although the two compartments are separated. You just need to top them up and make sure that you haven't got any leaks. You'll probably notice on here that my ACE fluid level is low. I'm aware of this. I've got all the stuff lined up ready for a total refurbishment of my ACE system, which will be a completely different video. I won't show that on this one. I'll be replacing the pipes, the hoses and the ACE valve block in the middle and getting rid of those pesky leaks.